I just waffle on for a few seconds before I know it starts. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, I will go to Jeff's solo layouts. There we go.
The Daleks are back again.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting differences between Britain and America is like you've got Doctor there with a dot after the DR. We don't bother with the dot. It's just just DR.
Well, I don't know. Like in the original Doctor Who episodes, that in the credits they listed him as DR. Who you're saying it didn't have a dot? I can't remember honestly.
Well, it's inconsistent. I mean, I've certainly because I checked it out like one time you mentioned it, and it's not really put that much.
All right. Well, anyway, we are doing Genesis of the Daleks Part 2. So I'm going to read this summary of the Doctor Who reference guide, and then my review that I wrote 13 years ago, and then we'll talk about. I think there was a couple of things that I hope that I'll remember when it comes time that I noted as I was watching the episode that may or may not have been in my review. So hopefully all those will come back to me. But anyway, Sarah hides as Garmin and Davros leave. Garmin almost spotting Sarah when he hears a sound from her. As Sarah backs away, a hand of a Muto reaches for her and covers her mouth from behind. 5 or 6 of them surround her, and she falls. Niter comes to bunker security guard Tane and has Harry and the Doctor pushed into the doorway of the room. The two are being taken to senior researcher Ronson, the Doctor's belongings in a box to be taken also. The Doctor asks if they are going to have tea or coffee. The guards yell out about a security scan. The Doctor asks if they can get on with it and start the torture. He gets a first and last warning about his attitude. Harry is scanned and it hurts his head a bit. He is cleared, but when the Doctor is scanned, the time ring on his left wrist is found and taken. The Doctor tries to stop them from taking it, telling them it is not a weapon, but he is hit down to the floor and it is put in the box with the Doctor's other belongings. The Doctor tells Harry that the time ring is their only hope of getting back to the TARDIS. They are taken to Ronson in Davros's bunker. One of the Mutos, Severin, touches Sarah's face and thinks she is beautiful and does not want to kill her. The other Muto, Geralt, wants to kill her. Severin does not think that they should kill just because something is not in their image. She has no deformities and no imperfections. That was one of the things that just kind of coming to me now, so I'm going to note it, that he says that, and then later the Thal guy says she's almost a norm. So you have there you have your spectrum of opinions on how good-looking Sarah is. No deformities and no imperfections. She's only slightly mutated. All right. The other Muto...
Well, maybe the Thals want everyone to be blonde. And then I was thinking about that. Is every single member of the Thal race depicted in this program blonde? Because I was thinking about their older leaders. Did we see one and maybe with grey hair?
Yeah, I didn't think the ones in this episode were blonde, but maybe I just didn't see them. Or maybe did they have helmets on or something covering their hair?
Yeah, all the guards that come in at the end and shoot, they've all got blonde hair. And they even have Hilary Minster in. You see him in the next episode from Allo Allo, who played General von Klinkerhoffen.
Well, anyway, I didn't notice that. So if they were blonde, then they were dark enough that it didn't look like it to me.
Because that was a big feature in the first episode, wasn't it? That all the Thals.
Yeah, well, there was a nice callback to that because in that story, had Susan describing them as being perfect, and when I wrote my review of that one, I said that was kind of odd that she called them perfect for some reason.
Well, she fancied the guys.
At that time, from what I understand, the people that was, I guess, what at least contemporary Britain at that point thought was like perfect looking people. So they thought it would relate to people that way or whatever. So anyway, where was I? Okay, Severin fights with him and gets him to turn away, but the fight ends abruptly as a patrol of soldiers is close. The soldiers yell at them not to move. The other Muto runs straight into the soldiers. He turns to run away and gets only a few feet before one of the soldiers shoots him in the back. One of the soldiers mentions a waste of good ammo. They are Thals, and they find Sarah and Severin. Instead of killing Mutos on site now, they decide to take them for slave labor on their rocket launcher, needing slaves to load explosives onto it. When Sarah seems too slow, they are about to shoot her, but Severin stops them and helps Sarah to her feet and on their way to the Thal dome. Ronson sits with the Doctor and Harry in the science division in the bunker. As Ronson toys with the box of belongings, the Doctor absently takes the time ring, but the old man takes it back. Ronson tells him that in the 7 galaxies it is known that only Skaro has life. The Doctor tells him it is a known fact there are more than 7 galaxies. Ronson checks the readings from the scans of Harry and the Doctor that were done and is wide-eyed. Their blood and chemical makeup is like nothing on this planet. None of it conforms to any known Skaro life other than external appearances. The Doctor asks him if he is familiar with spatial dimensions correlated to relative time. An alarm, and Davros, Supreme Commander, arrives with news on his Mark III project. Reports on his new development will go around soon, but first, a demonstration. The wheeled machine creature traveling case, what the Doctor knows as a Dalek, comes in. Davros at this time only calls it a Mark III travel machine. Ronson tells the Doctor that, and when the Doctor mentions to him it is a Dalek, in return the Doctor puffs, "If you say so." Davros has perfected voice control. Niter and Garmin put the Dalek gun into it, fitting it into a hole on the machine. Davros will now turn over self-control to the Dalek. It will be a living, thinking, self-supporting creature, he claims. The Dalek turns to Harry and the Doctor and says, "Aliens, I must exterminate." Ronson touches the controls on Davros' wheelchair and stops it from killing them, which makes Davros mad. He yells that Ronson will be punished for interfering. His creature shows a natural desire for taking action, detecting nonconformity, and he stopped it. At first light, the demonstration with the aliens present will continue. Davros leaves the area, and Niter tells Ronson the prisoners must be questioned in their cell. Ronson wants to finish here first. Sarah and Severin are in a cell in the Thal dome and meet one of the young Khalid officers who originally helped capture the Doctor. Like them, he is now a prisoner too. He tells them they are lucky. The Thal patrols usually shoot on sight, but they need slave workers to load explosives onto the rocket's nose cone, and the rocket will be launched against the Khalid dome. The Khalid is fearful that his whole race will be wiped out. Severin wonders if that will be worth it to end 1,000 years of war. The Khalid tells him that with no protective shielding to protect the slave workers from the dystronic explosives, to reduce the rocket's weight, the Thals that will do the work will die after a few hours' exposure. The resting period is over, and they must start again on loading the rocket. A Thal guard comes in and pushes all of them out and yells at Sarah to get out, pushing her. The guard shoves a gun right in front of her face. She goes out, working in the rocket silo. Sarah sees the level on the exposure register on the safety zone, but it slowly moves to the toxic zone. The workers are carrying it up to the rocket's nose cone. The Doctor is thrown down onto the floor through the opening door to his cell. Harry is already in there. The Doctor fed them scientific gobbledygook, technical jargon that even he didn't understand. The Doctor found out more from them. 3 to 4 miles away is the Thal dome, and both domes are bomb-proof and underground. The Khalid dome consists of a scientific elite, which Harry compares to a sort of think tank. Ronson comes in and tells the guard he is armed, so the guard doesn't have to wait. He closes the doors, talks to them in private, admitting the Doctor knew what the name of the Travel 3 machine was, a Dalek, before it was revealed by Davros. Davros only just revealed the name an hour ago. Ronson is concerned about the Daleks project, and he claims others are also concerned against it. They feel it is immoral and evil. The elite was formed to try to end the war, but the project changed to ensure the survival of their race. The Mutos were made that way they are by the war. When Davros declared the mutations are irreversible, he began his experiments and predicted what their future evolutionary form would be. He took living cells and produced what he called the ultimate living creature, what the Khalid supposedly will evolve into. Ronson takes them to the Khalid Dalek creature nursery. The reviewing panel, the Doctor and Harry see the growling, murmuring creatures. Ronson claims that is our future. Sarah, the Khalid, Severin, and the Muto slaves are given another rest period. Sarah claims if they wait to take action, they may not have enough strength to. She wants them to get out of here along with her. They cannot get out at the command post. The Thal troops would shoot them dead. Sarah proposes the nose cone rocket that leads to the surface of the dome will be a good way to get out. Khalid boy soldier agrees. The angle once out of the top of the hole from which the rocket was to shoot out of is gentle. They can slide down. Severin notes the climb up the scaffolding is dangerous, but there is no other way out. The Khalid would rather die trying to escape than die slowly from the poisonous substance, which even now may be killing them. Sarah will pass the word to the others. Bronson tells the Doctor and Harry in the Khalid bunker that the Dalek is now being designed by Davros as a weapon devoid of conscience. There are a few in the Khalid government that can act to end Davros's power, but they must be made aware of what is happening. Bronson is not allowed to leave the bunker and is not allowed in the city. He gives the Doctor and Harry a list of the names of those in power that will go against Davros. There are secondary ducts Harry and the Doctor can crawl through to get to the dome, but there is a system of caves at the edge of the wastelands which they will have to cross. And some of Davros's early experiments were with animals and created horrific things, and some of them are still alive in the caves. Sarah passes out in the Thal dome, but it is a ruse to get the Thal guard distracted so the Khalid prisoner can punch him down. The slaves run out with Khalid, Sarah, and Severin, but no one takes the Thal guard's gun. Harry and the Doctor go into the duct, hoping to find Sarah on the way. Ronson is happy to hear they will not let the list fall into the wrong hands. The two start out as Ronson avoids a guard passing. In the Thal dome, the Thal guard recovers. Harry and the Doctor reach a vent where a grill covers the entrance to the caves. Beyond it, they can see a slug-like thing with a shell move past the duct exit. Actually, I thought it looked more like a turtle. But anyway, Harry and the Doctor get the barred grill off and go into the caves. Sarah and the men climb the rocket scaffolding in the Thal dome. The guard has sounded the alarm now, and 3 Thal sharpshooters, well, you would think they'd be sharper, come into the rocket launcher area and start firing rifles at the climbers. One Muto is shot down and falls. The other also falls. Sarah cannot climb another step. The young Khalid soldier comes over to help her and covers her, but he is shot in the back and falls off the scaffolding. Sarah screams. Severin comes to her and tells her the Thals are coming up after them. He tells her she must move on up. He gets her to try. She reaches for a girl to follow him up as he continues, but she misses it and falls, plunging through the air, screaming. So the other thing I was going to note before I read my review is just I remember thinking the freeze frame at the end, I would have thought it would have been more effective to go ahead and show her fall all the way out of the shot as opposed to freezing frame like just a second after she falls. But anyway, that's one of those nitpicks I talked about in the last one that I can say that tells you that. And I enjoy the episode so much I've got to look kind of hard to think of things that I would do different. But.
Oh, what it might have been, Jeff, is that was sort of maybe a new effect at the time, and so they would tend to overdo effects like that when they were new. It's just like in, say, the late 80s, early 90s, where they would overdo the effect of things going backwards, and you would have stories on television of things moving backwards. And I remember in the 1970s, they would make a big thing of slow motion, and they would put on screen in big caption, slow motion.
Yeah, they did.
And maybe it was a bit of thing like that, like, hey, we can do a freeze frame. Maybe there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, well, if they were going to do that, then they should have let it go a little longer before they did. And anyway, it makes it look like they had to freeze the frame in order to not show you that she really is not falling very far. That's the impression.
Yeah. I mean, spoiler for next episode, but Sarah's.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying that's what it looked like. Even if I hadn't seen the next episode, I would say, oh, they just didn't. They didn't want to have her actually have to fall very far. But anyway, as I said last week, I first saw this episode in the 80s, but I wrote a review. I wrote a review of it in 2007, and here's what I wrote then. While they almost could have used a split screen there near the end with our separated heroes trying to make their respective escapes, Sarah trying to escape the Thals and Harry and the Doctor escaping the Khalids, only to encounter the ancient ancestor of the Slither. Davros's voice seems to alternate between electronically enhanced and not, but maybe that was intentional. No explanation yet for how Davros got in his mutated condition or why he wasn't thrown out in the wastelands himself. He certainly looks worse off than the supposed Mutos. Apparently, if you haven't bathed in a few days, you're considered a mutation on Skaro. Action, great dialogue, the first demonstration of the bloodthirst of the Daleks. Great stuff. another 10. Stay tuned to find out if Sarah escapes suspended animation. So that was what my review was.
That's a good review. That is, Jeff. I mean, that's better than most professionals. You got wit in there and nice and punchy.
Oh, well, thank you. What do you have to say about this episode, Ben?
Right then, okay. So I'm going to give this about 9 out of 10 because there's a few little sort of like. So, for example, for a long time, the media in Britain, they sort of like they mistook the Daleks as robots, and then when he has the machine come in, and when he demonstrates the machine, well, it's not entirely clear. Is that just the machine? Is that just the robotic part of the Dalek? Or is there a creature inside? Because he refers to it as a machine. I think, you know what I mean? If there was actually a Dalek creature inside of it, Davros should have made sure, because I got the impression that was just the machine. That was just the travel machine.
Yeah,
but then it talked.
About it.
Yeah, it was a bit, because you know what I mean? Because they had to continually remind the audience that these are not robots. There are creatures within the machine. Because the media, the newspapers, they would refer to the Daleks as robots. And they thought, and they even did that thing where it even became confused later on with Destiny of the Daleks, where it was sort of intimated that the Daleks became completely robotic by the time of Destiny of the Daleks. But I think just little things like when they were talking about the angle of the dome, they could have like made the dome a little flatter to make that believable about the. But that's just that tiny little quibble. Oh yes, one of the things that people talked about is as a criticism of this story. It's just like there's like two tiny criticisms of it. One is that like it wasn't a very convincing special effect on like the clam thing, but yeah, that's hardly anything. And then the idea of the cities within spitting distance of each other. You know, they don't have to go very far before the next city. But there's recently been a television series called Krypton, which is very good, by the way, which is another one where you've got cities across the planet. And I think with different productions, they would like travel between them and make the distances a little bit further. That's just the nature of the production. Oh, yes. From a technical level, again, the benefit of doing stuff in low lighting means that you've not got these sets would look pretty bad if this was overlit, I reckon. But yeah. They get away with it. Yeah, here they did. This was an ambitious shot for the time because they're using chroma key. BBC called it CSO, color separation overlay, and because it's like doing that sort of like tilt down, and it's like it's very difficult to sync up the two camera sources, one with the miniature and then one with the, and then they did it later on in the 70s with Meglos. Was the first time they did something called scene sync, where you know, with the chroma key. Right, so I'm gonna give it about it's hard. I'm gonna give it about 9 because I'll sort of explain why. Because in the sort of the next episode, there's sort of something in hindsight about this episode. It's difficult because for me, it's like every episode, the next episode is better than the previous one. That's the way I see it. So,
well, that's why I'm glad when I wrote the reviews that I did, you know, that I hadn't seen it in so long, so I wasn't really anticipating I mean, I had some memories of it, but I wasn't like looking at it as, oh, I knew what was going to happen next. Overall, it was just exciting to experience it again, and I felt that way, watching it again last night. It's a little bit, I still had those feelings, even though it might have been lessened a little bit. But as I was watching it, I'm like, I was sort of, some of it was just memories of how cool it was when I hadn't seen it as many times, but it still gives me that feeling, even so. So that tells me how effective that it is. And really, to me, at least to the ones that I've seen so far, it's probably only like the top 6 or 7 Doctor Who stories that really I just have that feeling of like, I can't wait to see what happens next kind of feeling. So
yeah, and that's the ultimate thing with the story, like what happens next.
Where it's really, I forget that I'm even like looking at it as a TV production, because I'm just so wrapped up in the story. So
yeah,
and so it's only like sort of when it came to thinking of things to put in the review when I would consider things like I just said about the freeze frame being slightly awkward looking, or and what you said about the creature, like actually the in that one, in part 2, what they show the creature like slithering through the ducts or whatever, I thought that was very effective looking.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Because, like you said, with the lighting and everything, they don't really show much of it. They just show, this something is crawling through there, and you see just enough of it. It looks pretty impressive at that point.
Yeah, and that was also the strategy used in Alien, where they didn't actually show much of the alien, and it was dark. The Ridley Scott movie, 1979.
Yeah, we had another example in that picture you've got on the screen of what you were talking about last week, at how effective Tom Baker was, at least in his early time, at being doing both the humor as well as the serious parts. And I think in the next bit where he, with a straight face, completely says no tea, Harry. Like that's the thing to be concerned about, but you realize that he's conveying more than, where it's really not about the tea, but it still comes out. So it's both funny and chilling at the same time because of the way he delivers it. So
yeah, and I do think it's important that and I'm getting pretty convinced of this, that there's the stuff Tom Baker could get away with because of his dramatic performance and his voice. After a silly bit, he could always, because it's like it's certain people have a voice where there's gravitas with it, and you sort of get it back on track. But if he said he had this voice which was like a quirky voice all the while, it'd be difficult to then sort of get things back on track. With Patrick Troughton had that ability as well, the ability to get things back on track after a light moment. Mm-hmm. Because, as you said, the main thing is almost like the gold standard of a story is to have the audience forget it's a story and just be completely involved in it, because then that means everything is right, and the story makes sense, the characters are believable, and it just exists as a hypothetical world unto itself, and you're just sort of involved with the characters and the story. Yeah, and again, Philip Hinchcliffe said that he treated Tom Baker like he was a horse, so like really like a wild horse, and like he said that he wouldn't have been able to tame him if he'd have got him later on in his career.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what some directors said about working with Robin Williams, that he was, if you could get Robin Williams to focus on and be serious enough to do the stuff, he could was capable of some really good acting and performances.
Yeah.
But if you let him just kind of go off the rails, then you were going to kind of lose control of it. So it sounds similar.
There's a similar thing with Paul Darrow. He had because he was in a particular Doctor Who story where he was accused of I won't give plot details. Where I'll just talk about his performance, where he was accused of hamming it up, and he said that's because the script wasn't very good, and he was talking about time lash, and so in his performance, he made it a little bit Richard III. In it.
That one,
I
don't know if I ever saw, and if I did, it was a long time ago. So,
yeah, but I'll just say that it's worth it just for him. I mean, Time Lash is a pretty bad Doctor Who story, but you've got two things that are going for it. One, you've got Perry in it, and two, you've got Paul Darrow in it. So there's even something good in every.
Well, I approach everyone that I haven't seen or don't remember with the same attitude that I'm prepared to enjoy it, and then it has to convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
So I don't really care what, if anything, people bashing a story makes me sort of already want to defend it, but it's really not like different because, like I said, I go into it wanting to enjoy everything, so it's no different. I guess I just I want to enjoy it for an additional reason, so I can turn around and say those people are wrong. But sometimes they end up being right anyway, like Underworld. And Underworld, even have to say, has a very good first episode. It just kind of goes off track after that.
Yeah, and in terms of I remember that Underworld, right? Yeah, because that was at a time when we were getting a bit more comedic in that season. I think that was that the season before season 7? Was that season 16 Underworld?
It would have been 15 because 16 was the Key to Time series.
Right. But I think those final 3 years were Graham Williams' era, which was after they got rid of Philip Hinchcliffe, because again it was because of the violence on television thing with Mary Whitehouse, and Tom Baker was getting a little bit, was getting more powerful and bigger in his boots.
Anyway, we can talk about that another time. But they still managed to do some pretty good stories during that period too. Just anyway.
So, what did you think of this character? I mean,
I think he's well played. That's one where maybe what you were saying earlier about thinking about future stuff plays in a little bit, just because I don't know how much is me knowing what happens or me just having seen enough things like this. My thought is that as soon as he's helping them or telling them these things, I'm like, he's doomed. He's gonna get killed, because it always happens in these stories. Like when the guy that's the one who's revealing the the secrets or whatever, the bad guys don't want to get out. I'm like, I know it's only a matter of time before something's going to happen to him. So
yeah, you've got the 3 blonde Thals here, and I've just remembered that my main contribution to this video is going to be reading about creating Davros and like little background details. I've got it here in this book. So I'll try to read it. I'll take Jeff's advice, read it slower so I can talk better and not trip over my tongue. Michael Wisher rehearsed for his role as Davros by wearing a paper bag on his head and sitting in the chair the whole time. This allowed him to perfect his vocal rather than physical performance. While playing Davros in studio, Wisher wore a kilt to avoid wearing out his trousers with rapid leg movements while sitting inside Davros's wheelchair. The wheelchair was a prop based on the lower part of a Dalek and constructed by visual effects designer Peter Day and his assistants Tony Harding and Steve Druitt. Davros's mask was constructed by visual effects sculptor John Freelander, and you will know which other mask he did. Which other mask is he famous for, Jeff? Centauran mask in the Centauran experiment.
Okay.
I think he did that one. Davis's mask was constructed by visual effects sculptor John Friedlander, and Hinchcliffe suggested that this should resemble the evil Venusian genius, the Mekon, from the Dan Dare comic strips from the Eagle comic of the 1950s and 1960s. The mask included a blue bulb which illuminated as Davros's third eye, but this stopped working in some of the recording sessions. In coming up with the voice, Michael Wisher recalled the tones of philosopher Bertrand Russell. Wisher's voice was fed through a ring modulator to make him sound like a Dalek. And you brought that up about sometimes you get that effect and sometimes not.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure whether that was intentional or whether it was just the equipment failing, like they meant him to always be electronically enhanced, or whether it was supposed to be sort of an example that the technology was still not perfected.
I think it was with Dav, where it was like when he got angrier, then he would sound more like a Dalek. I think that's what we tended to get. That maybe that tendency tended to go on a bit more with like subsequent portrayals.
Yeah, well, definitely with the tone. That I mean, again, as we talk about future episodes, but in the probably the most famous cliffhanger of this story in terms of Davros's thing. That's where you sort of have that moment where it's almost like he's turning into a Dalek. So yeah, I thought all of that was well done. I'm just not sure which, and it's it doesn't take away from the story, in my opinion, that you don't know for sure like how much was intentional, how much is just their equipment failing at certain times.
Yeah, it might just be the way the ring modulator works, where we could sort of hypothesize that a sort of an in-universe reason is that Davros is very weak and he can talk quietly, and just in order to get some extra volume, that's when it sounds more modulated. And then I've got a quote here from Terry Nation talking about Davros. Terry Nation on Davros. Wait a minute. Wisher's voice was fed through a ring modulator to make him sound like a Dalek. Okay. Terry Nation on Davros. Davros served two roles. Firstly, he was half man, half Dalek, a sort of mutated missing link between the two species, the Khaleds, as they once were, and the Daleks they were to become. Secondly, with the Daleks' slow speech patterns, having a Dalek as a spokesperson for their point of view all through would have been dull, and worse, would have slowed down the pace of the story. I wanted someone who could think like a Dalek, but talk in a more human fashion. I feel very strongly the Daleks themselves should be left to speak in short, snappy sentences, not long speeches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. In the episodes where they talk too much, they start to lose some of their intimidation. They just start sounding goofy.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when they did that thing of one was higher pitched, one was lower pitched, and then one was insecure.
Yeah. You have the one that first appeared in the story that gets, it's called The Chase, where it's like the dunce Dalek, where it not only has a lower voice, but also just sounds stupider. Like it's not sure what's going on. Like, okay.
Yeah, because by that time that was a bit of a comedic story. Like even when in I remember that The Chase, and they sort of like pulled it back after that. Maybe Terry Nation had got sort of. Did he write that one, The Chase? Because I know around that period,
so. I think that was David Whitaker, and then I think when the next time they came back was in the Daleks Master Plan, and to me, part of the reason that they were so effective in that is because it was like the serious Daleks are back after having them too goofy in the last story.
Yeah, and then was that episode called? Was that story called Galaxy 4 with the Dravins in?
With the Dravins, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because I've never seen that, because it was one of the lost ones. I don't know if they sort of reconstructed it.
Yeah, well, I think they found one complete episode, if I remember right, later on, which I have never actually seen the full complete one. And then I think there were parts of the video that they had of another episode that I have seen that were on the Lost in Time DVD.
Yeah, I mean, what they could have done with this is just like... Maybe alternatives. They could have like put some pictures on here instead of having it in English.
Yeah, or colors or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like someone dying. A tick. Say just green and red, and just green, and then right. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to, because a lot of it would just sort of go on with what we said in the previous review. Little touches like, which reminds me, I didn't mention it in the first episode, but I like the fact that they had that like little monorail in that first episode. That little train when they went through the bunker, and here they're probably getting something which is practical, like a real thing that they probably use, sort of like a little electric vehicle, like milk float type thing. They used to have those in England, Jeff. Like they used to deliver the milk on battery-powered milk floats. Yeah.
One thing that I'm noticing is, you talked about the DVD referring to Colin Baker's performance as being unfairly criticized. Honestly, I think sometimes Sarah got unfairly criticized as just sort of being like the damsel in distress that keeps on getting captured and always needs to be rescued. But if you look,
she's good in this one.
Yeah, she gets into these situations, but she does like sort of take charge of things. She is proactive. It's just she often physically isn't able to. She sort of bites off more than she can chew.
Right? Yeah, I should say
tries
something
to get
about
things
that.
done and realizes she's not actually physically capable of doing it, and then she ends up.
I should maybe
overpowered by somebody.
I should maybe say something about that with Terry Nation and female characters. So, in this, you've got a later character who comes along, Bethan. So there's only two women in this. There's Sarah and Bethan. Also, we know that later on, you're not particularly fond of Servalan, but he created the female leader of the Federation, Servalan.
Well, yeah, and at the time when she first came on, when he was writing her, she was better. It was later on when he wasn't as involved in the show, not writing the episode, where it seems like they allowed her to become a caricature instead of she was a stronger character at the beginning. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that, because the actress herself, she had a bit of a mental health issues between seasons, because she was going through like Jungian therapy at the time, and she went to a convent school.
Yeah. Anyway, even though Terry Nation didn't create the character of Sarah, I think he used her well in terms of taking advantage of what her strong suits were.
Anyway, so there's a series, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Have you ever heard of the series called Survivors?
Yeah.
Right, and the lead character in that was a female character. And that was in the 1970s. So you could say that there's a theme there of Terry Nation going on to write strong female characters who would drive the plot rather than just being passive. So we could say there's 4 examples there. Sarah, Bethan, the lead character in Survivors, and then Servalan for 1970s television. Right. I don't know if I've got anything else to say. Yeah, I'm going to knock a point off just because that thing with the Dalek and making it like not clear whether it's like.
Yeah, to me, it's not enough to knock points off, but there are things that make me curious, and that when you bring that up, I'm like, yeah, I did kind of mentally note that as I was watching it, where he doesn't specifically say that but it may be that Davros didn't want to kind of freak out the Khalids more, like he kind of had to sort of ease them into this idea that this is going to be a working thing. So it may be that he kind of didn't want to emphasize that this is something inside there is what we are becoming.
But he does call it the travel machine,
right?
so they know they're going to go in it.
But yeah, I think it's possible that the character wanted to de-emphasize it. But yeah, that, and again, what I said, I wondered about, why these people that supposedly kick out all the imperfections are led by the guy who looks the most mutated of all. So that's the kind of the thing that it makes me go,
Yeah.
there's got to be a story behind this. And it's the most disappointing thing that we never really fully get that.
Yeah. I think this guy was in one episode of Blade 7 and he was like, this actor, he played Ken Masters in Howard's Way. Not Stephen Greif. I've written his name down. I've forgotten. He's at the end. I can't believe I've forgotten his name. But he's a good actor. Ian Marta. No. Severin the Muto. Stephen Yardley. I think he's a good character, and I think it's a good performance that he gives of Severin the Muto. Stephen Yardley. So
I think Garman's good too, but we haven't really gotten to him doing much yet. He's just sort of been there. He's only had a few lines.
Yeah, I think that actor's better than when he was in Twin Dilemma. I think that same actor turned up in Twin Dilemma. Right then. Okay, so I give it 9. Jeff gives it 10.
Yep.
Short review, just 41 minutes.
That's all right. So join us next week for part 3.
All right. Excellent.